Welcome to another episode of Raven Tales of Terror. I'm your host, Ravian Wolfsbane, and today we are delving into the unsettling and mysterious case of Edmund Kemper, also known as the co-ed killer. Before we begin, I want to issue a content warning for today's episode as we will be exploring sensitive and graphic details about his crimes, so viewer discretion is advised. Edmund Emil Kemper III entered the world on December 18th of 1948 in Burbank, California. He was the middle child and only son born to Clennell Elizabeth Kemper and Edmund Emil Kemper Jr. Edmund Jr., Kemper's father, was a World War II veteran who later worked as an electrician in California. Clennell often criticized her husband's job, causing tensions in the household. Edmund Jr. once remarked that living with Clennell was more challenging than his wartime experiences. From a young age, Kemper displayed troubling behavior, such as cruelty to animals. At just 10 years old, he buried a pet cat alive and later decapitated it, displaying its head on a spike. Kemper took pleasure in deceiving his family about the act, showcasing his sinister nature. He also killed another family cat at the age of 13, believing it favored his younger sister. Kemper's dark fantasies and morbid imagination were evident early on, as he engaged in disturbing rituals with his sister's dolls, where he would behead them, and he would also play a game called the gas chamber, where he would tie his sisters up and they would pretend to struggle and play dead. Kemper also later recalled a game they played using a large rug, where they would be rolled up in it and would have to get out of it with no help. He also displayed concerning behavior towards his teacher. It is said that he would follow her home from school with his father's bayonet in hand. However, exact details of this are unclear. Despite his unsettling tendencies, Kemper had a close relationship with his father, which was shattered when his parents divorced in 1961. He then moved to Helena, Montana with his mother Clennell, who had a tumultuous and abusive relationship with him. She subjected Kemper to emotional and psychological abuse, often belittling and humiliating him. She made him sleep in a locked basement and refused to show him affection, instilling deep-seated emotional scars. She claimed locking him in the basement was to keep his sister safe, as she was afraid of her son due to his tall stature. At the age of 14, Kemper ran away from home in a desperate attempt to reunite with his father in Van Nuys, California. However, he soon discovered that his father had remarried and now had a stepson. Kemper did stay with his father, however, his father kicked him out due to Kemper's stepmom being under stress because of his presence. Kemper then went to live with his paternal grandparents on a ranch in North Fork, where he felt a strong sense of discomfort and alienation. It was said that Ed's grandmother was very verbally and emotionally abusive. Kemper's early life was marked by trauma, dysfunction, and psychological abuse, laying the groundwork for the darkness and violence that would consume him in later years. His twisted upbringing and disturbing experiences were harbingers of the horrors that would unfold in the chapters of his life yet to come. At the age of 15, on August 27th of 1964, Kemper would commit his first murders. Kemper engaged in a heated argument with his grandmother while seated at the kitchen table. Fueled by rage, Kemper abruptly left the room, retrieved a rifle gifted to him by his grandfather for hunting rabbits and gophers, and returned to the kitchen, when he fatally shot her in the head and fired 2 more rounds into her back. Reportedly, his grandmother's final words expressed concern about him shooting birds again. Additionally, some reports indicate that she sustained multiple post-mortem stab wounds with a kitchen knife. Upon his grandfather's return from the grocery store, Kemper proceeded to shoot him in the driveway near his car. Unsure of his next steps, Kemper called his mother, who advised him to contact the local authorities. Subsequently, Kemper reached out to the police and awaited arrest. Following his apprehension, Kemper admitted that he had desired to experience the sensation of killing his grandmother and intentionally murdered his grandfather to spare him of the anguish of discovering his wife's fate. Psychiatrist Donald Lund, who later evaluated Kemper, suggested that his actions could be interpreted as a form of retribution against his parents' rejection. At the age of 15, Kemper's heinous acts were deemed beyond comprehension, leading court psychiatrists to diagnose him with paranoid schizophrenia. Consequently, he was confined to Atacastro State Hospital, a high-security institution housing mentally ill offenders in San Luis Obispo County. At Atacastro, the youth authority psychiatrists and social workers held contrasting views with the court psychiatrists regarding Kemper's mental state. They reported that Kemper exhibited no disorganized thinking, hallucinations, or delusions, and showed no signs of abnormal thought patterns. They found him to be intelligent and introspective, with an initial IQ score of 136 indicating high intelligence. Consequently, Kemper was reevaluated and diagnosed with a less severe condition known as personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type. Subsequently, a follow-up IQ test revealed an even higher score of 145. Kemper impressed his caretakers at Atacastro by exemplifying model behavior as a prisoner. He was even trained to administer psychiatric assessments to fellow inmates, earning praise for his diligent work ethic. His outstanding performance was considered atypical for someone with psychopathic tendencies. Kemper's involvement with the JCs at Atacastro led to his claim of developing new tests and scales related to personality assessments, showcasing his intellectual curiosity and skills. Following his second arrest, Kemper admitted to using his knowledge of psychological tests to manipulate his psychiatrists, revealing that he gained insights from administering tests to sex offenders at the facility. Kemper's time at Atacastro provided him with an opportunity to enhance his understanding of psychological assessments, allowing him to navigate and outsmart mental health professionals through his acquired knowledge. On his 21st birthday, December 18, 1969, Kemper was released on parole from Atacastro, despite his recommendations of the hospital psychiatrists. He was discharged into the care of his mother, Clarnell, who had remarried and now went by the name of Strandberg, living in Aptos, California, near her job at the University of California, Santa Cruz. Kemper exhibited signs of rehabilitation during his stay at Atacastro, leading to the expungement of his juvenile records on November 29, 1972. His probation psychiatrist praised his progress, describing him as a well-adjusted individual without any psychiatric issues, highlighting his intelligence, motivation, and positive response to treatment. Subsequently, Kemper attended community college as part of his parole obligations and aspired to become a police officer. Despite his rejection due to his towering height of 6 feet 9 inches, earning him the nickname Big Ed, he maintained connections with the Santa Cruz police force and frequented a local bar popular among law enforcement personnel. After working various menial jobs, Kemper secured employment with the State of California Division of Highways. However, his relationship with his mother remained strained and contentious, characterized by frequent volatile arguments over trivial matters. Kemper described his intense conflict with his mother during this period, expressing his disbelief at their fierce disagreements. Financial struggles led Kemper to move in with a friend in Alameda, but he found it challenging to escape his mother's influence due to her persistent calls and surprise visits. Despite his engagement to a high school student from Turlock, their relationship eventually ended, leading to Kemper's second arrest in March of 1973. In the same year, Kemper was involved in a motorcycle accident that left him with a severe arm injury. However, some sources state that it was a head injury and not his arm. He received a significant settlement of $15,000 from a civil suit involving the incident. Kemper reportedly purchased a new car after his settlement. Notably, during this time, Kemper noticed an increasing number of female hitchhikers and began preparing his car with potentially dangerous items, ultimately leading to his violent acts against these unsuspecting victims. Kemper confessed to picking up approximately 150 hitchhikers before acting on his homicidal urges. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper's murderous spree resulted in the deaths of 8 individuals, including 5 college students, a high school student, his mother, and her best friend. His victims were typically female hitchhikers whom he lured to remote locations before carrying out his gruesome acts. Kemper's actions during this period were attributed to his tumultuous relationship with his mother, whom he viewed as the ultimate target of his rage. In Berkeley, on May 7, 1972, Kemper picked up 2 18-year-old students, Mary Ann and Anita Mary, who were hitchhiking from Fresno State University. He deceived them by promising to take them to Stanford University, but instead drove them to a secluded wooded area near Alameda that he knew from his work at the Highway Department. Without revealing his true intentions, Kemper handcuffed Mary and locked Anita in the trunk of his car. He then brutally stabbed and strangled Mary before carrying out the same cruel fate on Anita. Kemper later admitted to feeling embarrassed when accidentally brushing against Mary's breast while handcuffing her, despite the horrific acts he committed shortly after. After loading the women's bodies into the trunk of his Ford Galaxy, Kemper drove back to his apartment. En route, he was pulled over by a police officer for a broken taillight, but managed to avoid detection of the corpses in his vehicle. Finding his roommate absent, Kemper brought the bodies inside of his apartment, where he engaged in disturbing activities such as photographing and having sexual intercourse with the naked corpses before dismembering them. He then placed the body parts in plastic bags, which he later discarded near Loma Prieta Mountain. Prior to disposing of Mary's and Anita's severed heads in the ravine, Kemper engaged in further degrading acts with their remains. In August of that year, Mary's skull was discovered on the mountain, and despite an extensive search, the rest of Mary's remains and any trace of Anita remained elusive. On the evening of September 14th, 1972, Kemper encountered a 15-year-old dance student named Eiko Koo, who was hitchhiking to a dance class after missing her bus. Taking advantage of the situation, he drove to a secluded area where he brandished a gun at Koo. In a bizarre turn of events, Kemper accidentally locked himself out of his car, but Koo surprisingly allowed him back inside, even though the gun remained in the vehicle. Once back in the car, he proceeded to strangle, assault, and ultimately kill her. After placing Koo's body in the trunk of his car, Kemper made a stop at a nearby bar for a few drinks before returning to his apartment. He later admitted to taking a moment to gaze at his victim's body in the trunk, like a, quote, fisherman admiring his catch, unquote. Upon reaching his apartment, he engaged in disturbing acts with the corpse, before dismembering and disposing of the remains, mirroring the pattern seen in his previous murders. Despite Koo's mother contacting the police and distributing numerous flyers seeking information on her missing daughter's whereabouts, no responses were received regarding Eiko Koo's fate. On January 7th, 1973, Kemper, now residing with his mother, drove around the Cabrillo College campus and picked up an 18-year-old student named Cynthia Ann Shaw. He took her to a wooded area where, armed with a .22 caliber pistol, he fatally shot her. Subsequently, he placed her lifeless body in the trunk of his car and proceeded to his mother's house. He concealed her body in a closet in his room while his mother was at work for the following day. Upon his mother's departure, Kemper subjected Shaw's corpse to further horrors by engaging in sexual intercourse with her and removing the bullet from her body. He then proceeded to dismember and decapitate her in his mother's bathtub. Kemper held onto Shaw's severed head for several days, using it for disturbing acts, before burying it in his mother's garden, pointed towards her bedroom, as a twisted tribute to her supposed desire for admiration. He discarded the rest of Shaw's remains by throwing them off a cliff. In the weeks that followed, investigators discovered most of Shaw's remains, which had been callously scattered like pieces of a gruesome jigsaw puzzle. A pathologist later confirmed that a power saw was used to cut her body into pieces. On February 5th of 1973, following a heated argument with his mother, Kemper left his home in search of potential victims. He later stated that the next attractive girl he saw would die. At that time, there was a growing fear of a serial killer targeting hitchhikers in Santa Cruz, prompting students to only accept rides from vehicles sporting university stickers. Kemper managed to obtain such a sticker due to his mother's employment at UCSC. On the campus, he separately encountered Rosalind Heather Thorpe, 23, and Alice Helen Allison Liu, 20. Kemper initially came across Thorpe as she left a lecture, and after she got into his car, believing him to be a fellow student, he engaged her in conversation. Later, he saw Liu looking for a ride and offered her a lift, prompting her to enter the back seat. Once on the road, Kemper abruptly stopped the car and shot Thorpe in the head with a .22 pistol, before turning his attention to Liu as she tried to escape in terror. After missing his first attempts, he shot her in the temple. Both women's bodies were wrapped in blankets following the attack. Returning to his mother's house with the victims' bodies, Kemper beheaded them in his car and then took the headless remains inside to commit further disturbing acts. He proceeded to dismember the bodies, removing any identifying bullets, and disposed of their remains the next day. Some remains were discovered at Eden Canyon a week later, with additional findings near Route 1 in March. At this time, there were two other serial killers, John Fraser and Herbert Mullins, committing crimes in the area, earning Santa Cruz the nickname the murder capital of the world. At this time, Ed also was dubbed the co-ed killer or the co-ed butcher by the press. When asked why he decapitated his victims in an interview, Kemper described his fascination with the head as a symbol of power and identity. He mentioned childhood notions of the head being crucial and viewed it as a trophy. Kemper had a twisted belief that once the head was removed, the person ceased to exist, though he acknowledged that there was more to a person than just the head. On April 20th, 1973, Kemper was awakened by his mother, Clarnell Strandberg, returning home from a party. As she sat in the bed reading, she noticed Kemper enter the room and commented on the possibility of them spending the night talking. Kemper responded that he wouldn't, to which she replied, "Good night." He waited for her to fall asleep before attacking her, using a claw hammer and a penknife. He brutally assaulted her, beheading her, and then engaged in necrophilia with her severed head. In a 1984 interview, he described placing her head on a shelf, screaming at it, throwing darts at it, and ultimately destroying her face. He also removed her tongue and larynx, disposing of them in a garbage disposal. He later recalled that the garbage disposal was spitting up the remains instead of disposing of them. Kemper concealed his mother's remains in a closet and went to a nearby bar. Upon returning home, he invited his mother's best friend, 59-year-old Sarah Taylor Sally Hallett, over for a dinner and a movie. Once she arrived, Kemper strangled her to death. He also engaged in necrophilia with her remains. He then hid her body in another closet, staged the scene to avoid suspicion, and left a note for the police. The note read, approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday. No need for her to suffer any more at the hands of this horrible, murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it. Not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time. I got things to do. Kemper fled the scene, embarking on a 1,000-mile journey to Pueblo, Colorado. While staying awake with caffeine pills, he carried 3 guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition in his car, believing he was being actively pursued. Upon arrival in Pueblo, he discovered no news of murders on the radio and called the police to confess. Initially, they dismissed his call, but he persisted and asked to speak with an officer that he knew. He confessed to the murders of his mother and Hallett, and when the police arrived, he surrendered and also admitted to the students' murders. In a later interview, Kemper explained his decision to turn himself in by stating that the initial purpose had vanished. It was a waste of time and he could no longer emotionally handle the situation. On May 7, 1973, Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder. He was represented by his chief public defender attorney, Jim Jackson, and due to Kemper's detailed confession, the defense had to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. While in custody, Kemper attempted suicide twice, leading up to his trial on October 23rd of 1973. Despite 3 court-appointed psychiatrists concluding that Kemper was legally sane, one of them, Dr. Joel Fort, revealed disturbing details from his investigation, citing incidents of cannibalism where he claimed Kemper had sliced flesh from his victims' legs, cooked them, and consumed them in a casserole. Fort also mentioned that Kemper was fully aware of his actions and found pleasure in the infamy that came with being labeled as a murderer. However, Kemper later refuted the confession of cannibalism, and there is also no proof that any acts of cannibalism took place. In California, Emnaden standard was used to determine insanity, requiring proof that at the time of the crime, the defendant did not understand the nature of their actions or that they were wrong due to a mental illness. Kemper appeared to understand the wrongfulness of his actions and showed signs of premeditation. During his trial, which began on November 1st, Kemper took the stand and testified that he killed his victims because he wanted to possess them. He attempted to convince the jury of his insanity by claiming he had 2 distinct personalities within him, and that he would, quote, black out when the killer personality took over. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Kemper to be sane and guilty on all counts on November 8th of 1973. Despite his request for the death penalty, capital punishment was on hold in California, so Kemper received concurrent sentences of 7 years to life for each count. He was sent to the California Medical Facility in Vacaville to serve his sentence. At the time of this video, Ed Kemper is still alive serving his sentence. During his sentence, he was teaching computer science to other inmates, and he also responds to his fan mail regularly. Edmund Kemper's crimes could stem from a complex combination of influences, such as his troubled upbringing, mental health challenges, and a fixation on power and dominance. Here are some fundamental reasons for his criminal behavior. Number 1, childhood trauma. Growing up with an abusive mother and absent father could have led Kemper to develop deep-seated emotional issues, resulting in a desire to exert control and power over others through violent acts. Number 2, mental illness. A diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia and other mental health disorders could have distorted Kemper's perception of reality, driving him to commit heinous crimes without fully understanding the consequences of his actions. Number 3, lack of empathy. Kemper's inability to empathize with his victims may stem from a personality disorder or psychopathic tendencies, allowing him to rationalize and justify his violent behavior without remorse. Number 4, sexual gratification. Kemper's deviant sexual desires may have fueled his violent acts, with his crimes serving as a way to fulfill his twisted fantasies and derive pleasure from the suffering of others. Number 5, power and control. Feeling powerless and marginalized in his personal life, Kemper may have sought to regain a sense of dominance and authority by terrorizing and manipulating his victims, displaying his dominance through acts of violence. Number 6, social isolation. Kemper's profound loneliness and inability to form meaningful connections with others may have fueled feelings of resentment and anger, ultimately driving him to lash out violently against society as a way to seek revenge for his perceived social alienation. Number 7, copycat behavior. Exposure to other notorious serial killers or violent media may have desensitized Kemper to the horrors of violence, leading him to imitate and emulate their actions as a means to gain notoriety and satisfy his twisted impulses. Number 8, violent fantasies. Kemper's deep-seated violent fantasies and desires, combined with a lack of impulse control, may have fueled his fantasies to the point where he felt compelled to act them out in reality, resulting in a string of brutal and disturbing crimes. Number 9, desensitization to violence. Kemper's prolonged exposure to violence, whether through personal experience or external influences, may have desensitized him to the gravity of his actions, numbing his empathy and conscience and enabling him to commit atrocities without hesitation. Number 10, the perfect storm. The combination of Kemper's troubled upbringing, mental health issues, lack of empathy, and deviant sexual desires created a volatile cocktail that culminated in a deadly spree of violence, making him a chilling embodiment of humanity's darkest impulses. In summary, Edmund Kemper's criminal acts were motivated by multiple factors, including a troubling upbringing, mental health challenges, a desire for power and control, and sadistic tendencies. Comprehending these elements can aid in attempting to comprehend the intricacy of his actions and the disturbing influences that led him to commit such appalling crimes. The public reacted with shock, horror, and disbelief to Kemper's crimes. Many people were terrified by the brutal and senseless nature of his actions. His crimes also sparked debates and discussions about mental health, the criminal justice system, and the need for better identification and treatment of individuals with violent tendencies. Kemper's case left a lasting impact on society and continues to be studied and analyzed by professionals and the public alike. His crimes, along with other high-profile cases, led to significant changes in the criminal justice system. Kemper's case highlighted the need for improved communication and information sharing among law enforcement agencies to better identify and track dangerous individuals. It also underscored the importance of implementing more robust background checks and psychiatric evaluations for individuals with a history of violence or mental health issues. Additionally, Kemper's case brought attention to the need for better treatment and rehabilitation programs for offenders with serious mental health issues. This raised awareness about the links between mental health and criminal behavior and spurred efforts to provide more comprehensive services for individuals in the criminal justice system. Overall, Kemper's crimes played a role in shaping policies and practices within the criminal justice system to better address the complexities of violent offenders and the underlying factors that contribute to their actions. After his arrest, Kemper assisted the FBI in understanding the mind of a serial killer and provided insights into the motivations and thought process behind his own crimes. He participated in interviews and discussions with FBI agents and profilers, offering his perspective on the factors that drove him to commit his heinous acts. Kemper's cooperation with the FBI helped law enforcement officials gain a better understanding of serial killers and their behaviors, which contributed to the development of criminal profiling techniques and investigative strategies used in solving similar cases. His insights and experiences provided valuable information for researchers and law enforcement agencies studying serial killers and working to prevent future crimes. It is important to note that Kemper's assistance to the FBI did not absolve him of his crimes, and he remains incarcerated for his actions. Thank you for listening to this episode of Raven Tales of Terror podcast. Join us next time as we delve into another dark and twisted story. And until then, stay safe and be wary of the monsters that lurk in the shadows.